Oscar, I know it's been a long process for you and a long journey of learning um, Hebrew, and to get to the point when you will be able to lead your community in prayer. And I know that a learning process sometimes can be frustrating. Well, I remember myself, and probably I shouldn't assume that it is for everybody. Sometimes boring, and often you lose motivation on the way. But I think that all who've been led by you today, and I'm sure who will be led by you tomorrow, will say thank you for doing it. I also know that there were probably moments, well, I remember for myself that there were moments when I was preparing for my bar mitzvah, which I absolutely loved and enjoyed. The love of learning and lifelong studying has been one of the most distinctive values of Jewish people. They say that it's not for good reasons that Jews love to learn or study. In case you need to run away, you can always take your brain, your skills, your experience with you, but you can't take all your material possessions. But I think there is much more in it than just a survival strategy. A lovely Hasidic tale beautifully conveys this notion. Reb Yehuda Leib was a great Talmid Chacham, was a great scholar of Talmud and Torah. He was often invited to give lectures on Talmudic topics as most privileged yeshivas in the world. Well, since he was in Eastern Europe, the most well-known was in Lithuania. So, and after the lecture, the Rosh Yeshiva, the head of academy, would usually introduce to him his finest students so that he might examine them. Everyone knew that Rabbi Yehuda Leib had a lovely daughter who had reached the age of marriage, and that rabbi was looking for a suitable husband for his beloved Rachel. Rabbi Yehuda would always ask potential candidates the same difficult question in the hope that one of them might pass the test. But so far, none had been able to answer this difficult question until one day, after one of such lectures at the great Kovna Yeshiva, the Rosh Yeshiva personally introduced to him his best student. He was brilliant in every subject. But when the rabbi asked him the same difficult question he asked all the other candidates, the student could not find the right answer. So Yehuda left. But as he was about to get on the coach and that would take him back home, the yeshiva student came rushing to the Rabbi Yehuda, and with almost no breath left, he reached him just as he was about to close the door of his coach. I beg you, Rabbi, asked the student, would you be kind enough to tell me what the correct answer to the question is? Said Rebbe, smiled and opened wide the door to his coach and said, young man, you are the one, and now come with me if you want. Well, let's take aside the problematic aspect of this story, that a father should decide who his daughter should marry, but this story has an important message and a question for all of us. What would happen if the student had an answer to the difficult question? What is the great value in Judaism? What is the greater value in Judaism? Deep knowledge or decent behavior? From this story, it seems that the greatest value in Judaism is modesty, the ability to acknowledge your limits so that you can ask right questions. Jewish scholars and philosophers tried to answer a similar question throughout the ages and came with their answers. Well, I'm sure if I ask all of you today to articulate, to to answer this question. What is greater, knowledge or behavior, knowledge or action? I'm sure you will have as many answers as there are people. In the language of Talmudic scholars, this question took a form of trying to define wisdom. What's the difference between being wise and being educated or knowledgeable? What is more important, understanding or good deeds? In the famous text from Pirkei Avot, Ben Zoma says, "Who is wise? The one who learns from all people." At the same time, bringing some balance to this saying, to this approach, there is another teaching from the same book, just a few chapters later. Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa would say, anyone whose actions are more plentiful than his wisdom endures. And anyone whose wisdom is more plentiful than his actions, his wisdom does not endure. In other words, it is not only about learning from people that matters, but actively applying your knowledge to everyday life should be considered the highest value. Rabbis compare a person to a tree whose knowledge is like, and person's knowledge is like leaves and branches, but person's actions are like roots. Without roots, the tree will not survive a windy day. Trying to find the perfect definition, rabbinic scholars came up with two more definitions. In the Talmud, this is the following definition. Who is wise? The one who foresees the consequence of one's actions. And Sifrei Dvarim, the commentary on the book of Dvarim, had a similar question. Who is wise? And the answer is, one who fulfills what he has learned. To understand something and have a theoretical knowledge of a matter is not the same as fulfilling your theory and applying it to the real life. Sometimes people can be too theoretical about life and the way society should operate, and it doesn't always possible to apply your theory into real life. One such example can be found in the Torah portion this week. The double Torah portion, Behar Bechukotai, describes an ideal society where every 7th year you're not supposed to work on your land. Just as the Torah calls for Jews to work 6 days and rest on the 7th, it calls for us to work the land 6 years and let it rest in the 7th. The Hebrew name for such year is Shemitah, which literally means release. In the Shemitah year, apart from letting your land rest, debts are to be forgiven, food storage to be freely redistributed and accessible to all. Such a beautiful idea. Every 7 years, you have a chance to begin your life however poor you are, whatever happens to you. Redistribute wealth in the society and let the planet to recover from human activity. But would it work in practice? Perhaps, like any dream for a better future, emendations will surely have to be made. In Mishnah Gittin, it says, Hillel, the famous Rabbi Hillel, instituted an exemption from the sabbatical year cancellation of personal loan. Hillel noticed that people stopped giving loans before the Shemitah year, and so he created an amendment to the laws of the Torah. Loans will no longer be erased so that people would feel comfortable lending again. The dream, the ideal society, equal opportunities for all, letting the land rest, had to be amended. The Torah's utopian dream was confronted with tangible reality. Even though changes were made that neutralized some of the more radical aspects of the vision, the effort to think of a better world was not for nothing. An active attempt to make the world a better place is more meaningful than hopelessly striving for perfection, since perfection will always remain beyond our reach. Well, does it mean that we should stop having dreams and utopian visions? I think on the contrary. Such visions help us to think about imperfections of our world and inspire us to make meaningful changes in our society, even though these changes will be a tiny part of the origin vision, the origin plan. Any dream will have to be balanced with reality of modern life. Often your dreams don't come true, and often only a tiny bit of your vision is fulfilled. But it doesn't mean you should stop dreaming. It simply means you should dream and aim much higher. And Oscar, I know that tomorrow you will be teaching us a little bit of your wisdom, your understanding of our tradition and of life. And I hope that your dreams will come true. Gan Yehi Ratzon. May this be God's will.